Hello everybody, and welcome back to Addie's World. My name is Aideen. If you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back. If not and this is your first time, sit down, relax, grab a drink, stay to the end of the video. If you like what you see, maybe think about hitting the subscribe button and making sure your bell is on for all upcoming notifications. Okay people, finally we have another True Crime Thursday, and I'm just going to preface this by putting a warning, a viewer's discretion. This deals with kidnapping, with sexual assault, with raping, and with the disposal of an infant body. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one guys, but it's a big case. It's a very big case. So I'm going to stop yapping and we're going to jump on in. Okay people, so you may know who we're going to talk about from the title. In April in 2008, a young 18-year-old girl was admitted to the hospital with severe kidney failure. A man had brought her in, had no history, no medical history, and they thought it was a little bit suspicious. Eventually a woman came to the hospital with this man and they were both detained and questioned. Why, you may ask? Well, today we're discussing Josef Fritzl. Fritz or Fritzl, I'm not 100% sure. But we are going to discuss Josef Fritzl and his kidnapping of his 18-year-old daughter and her entrapment in the basement of his house for 24 years, where he proceeded to rape, sexually assault her, father her 7 children, take 3 to move upstairs and adopt them, leave 3 down in the basement, and unfortunately 1 child was pronounced dead a few days after they were born. And from here, again that warning, he was said to have disposed of the infant's body by incineration. So this happened in 2008, but let's regress and go back to the very start. So on the 9th of February 1935, Josef Fritzl was born in Amstetten in Austria to parents Joseph and Marie. When he was just 21, he then married his wife Rosemary, who was only 17 at the time. From here they had 7 kids themselves, 3 boys and 4 girls, where Elizabeth was the youngest. Elizabeth was said to have not the best relationship with her father. She wanted to get the hell out of there. She found him very controlling, aggressive, in everybody's business, and they had no freedom. So when she was 18, she was ready to get the hell out of there. So in 1977, when Elizabeth was just 11 years old, it was said the abuse from her father, sexual abuse from her father, began, and it proceeded all throughout the years. And at the age of 15, she was finally finishing up school and she was studying to become a waitress. And unfortunately, in January in 83, Elizabeth herself ran away to Vienna to a friend, which she hid away with for 3 weeks. But after the 3 weeks, she was unfortunately found by the police and brought straight back to the house. So unfortunately, Elizabeth did have a history of maybe running away. So then in 84, when Elizabeth was 18, her father asked her to help her in the basement. He wanted to put up a door. Elizabeth went down and helped him. Unbeknownst to herself, the door she was putting up when her father was fitting it into place was actually the door into the basement or the cellar, which became her home and her prison for the next 24 years. He then put an ether cloth over her face and obviously like chloroform basically knocked her out, and she woke up in this cellar. And this is where her life for 24 years was spent, being raped, being abused, having multiple children all by herself. Now obviously Elizabeth's mother was Rosemary, and she was very concerned. She was the one who kind of reported her daughter missing and gave kind of police reports and kept this up, and obviously was worried about her child. But unbeknownst, letters would arrive in Elizabeth's handwriting to say that she had run away. She didn't want any contact with her family. If they tried to come find her, she was going to abandon and leave the country. She wouldn't send any more letters. And although these were in Elizabeth's handwriting, it was then later found out that Joseph, her father, was actually forcing her to write these letters to her mother to therefore not be found. to have the missing persons case closed, therefore allowing Joseph free reign of what to do. And he kind of put forth the idea that she had joined this cult and there was no way she was ever going to come back because she was a hippie and she wanted to join this cult, and she was gone. Now, as mentioned, when she was in captivity for the 24 years, she was starved. He visited her 3 times a week, mostly to rape her, to have dinner, to everything like this, and it was just horrendous conditions. The room was so small, and if she acted up, she was punished. There was only one kind of ventilation in and out of the room, and the electricity would be cut off, the heat or the cool air would all have been cut off for punishment. So she really had nowhere to go. This room was soundproof, and it turns out before he locked her in there in 84, around 81 or 82, he actually got planning permission to extend the basement. And when the officials came to said, oh yeah, he's abided by all the structures, all the conditions, this looks perfect. And again, what they didn't know is Joseph himself had put up fake walls and fake floors, that actually the room was slightly bigger and a lot deeper than was originally planned, and that was plan of mission was given for. So the 7 children, obviously they were a product of incest. In 1988, Kristen, her first child, was born. Again, she had been alone for the first 4 years of her life, being abused, being raped by her father, who he made call her by his name because he didn't want her to call him dad, you know. Anyway, so Kristen was kept in the basement till their release in 2008. Then Stefan came along in 1990. Stefan was born, and again he was kept in the basement along with Kristen and his mum. So 2 years later we had Lisa being born, and Lisa was actually, the cell was getting so crowded, so small, and so many children that Lisa herself was actually placed on the doorstep a few months after she was born with a letter again from Elizabeth saying, I can't look after my child at the moment, I am giving her to ye, please look after her till I come back. And this was a common thing for Joseph to do, is to make her write letters. And he did inspect the children and everything. There was no extra notes that Elizabeth was trying to pass along. Joseph and his wife Rosemary were then, the children were called fondlings. And to me is that they were surrendered to the state so they could be fostered and adopted. And since Rosemary and Joseph were the maternal grandparents, they could adopt them and foster them. So Lisa was brought upstairs. Then in 1993, getting the children and Elizabeth to dig with their hands, he allowed the enlargement of the cell, and it was tiny. I will put in pictures here. And they extended it, but they were working for months and weeks and months, maybe years, digging the soil with their bare hands, no tools, because he didn't want to get knocked the fuck out. 94, we have another baby girl. We have Monica, again, who was moved upstairs. Eventually, I think she had longer downstairs. She had maybe 17 months downstairs. Again, before, like Lisa, was magically placed on the doorstep with a note saying, it's my child, can't mind her, I'm in this cult, please look after her. So all along this time, it is said that Rosemary, the wife, did not know, and she didn't question it. She just assumed what the letters and what Joseph was telling her, that she was off in a cult and they were to mind his children till she eventually met her return, till Elizabeth eventually met her return. Now in 1996, this is where it gets a little bit harrowing. Elizabeth gave birth to twin boys, and unfortunately one of them passed away a few days after they were born. This is the one child that passed away and that Joseph decided to dispose of in an incinerator, like your own child. And it was just that he was just that far gone, the poor child. And even when you think of poor Elizabeth giving birth by herself. Now there is a film called The Girl in the Basement, which I literally just watched there while I was doing my makeup, trying to get a feel, and they did it so well about her going into labour. Like, she had all these books, what to do when your waters break, and it was just like, when you think of it, how dangerous and how petrified, and she did this by herself. Oh god, 7 times, once with twins, like, oh god. So Alexander was the surviving twin, and again he was moved upstairs. And this is another cruel thing. The children themselves were differentiated by upstairs and downstairs children, and you know by, unfortunately, the upstairs children were under the impression their mother had abandoned them, that she didn't want them and abandoned them. So there was probably a lot of fear, regret and anger towards Elizabeth, while the children downstairs never experienced the outside, never experienced the world. So when this all came to light and they were brought out, unfortunately, of the cell, there was masks, there was sunglasses, they had to be vaccinated. I mean, they hadn't been in the public, they hadn't been in air, so they had no immune system, basically, due to, like, they'd never experienced, their immune system had never been compromised, so therefore they had no immunity to anything. They were in a dark cell constantly all the time, so their eyes could never adjust to the light when they were first brought out, so sunglasses were brought in for them. And it's just, like, when you think of it, it was so barbaric of what happened. So that was 3 children upstairs, and in 2002 Felix, which was the youngest one, was born, and again he was kept downstairs with Kristen, and Kristen, Felix and Stefan were all downstairs, while Lisa, Monica and Alexander were upstairs. Now, what brought this all to light is in 2008. Kristen herself was, well, all the children were a product of incest, so disease and maybe kind of genetics wasn't on their side. And in 2008, in April, Kristen got really sick, had to be taken to, sorry, have a cup of tea, and had to be taken to hospital. And Joseph let Elizabeth carry her upstairs, which she saw light and her old house for the first time in 24 years, but then put her back into the cellar. And when they got to the hospital, Joseph produced another letter from Elizabeth saying her daughter was sick, you need to look after it. Now the smart thing about this hospital and the doctor, I think his name was Welter or something like that, I will put it here, they didn't really necessarily believe Joseph. They thought something was suspicious, which they reported to the police. And where that came from allowed them to reopen Elizabeth's missing person case from 24 years previously. And then they put a bulletin out kind of on news, media, everything like that, that they wanted the mother to come forward. They needed more details about Kristen's medical history. So this then prompted Joseph to eventually bring Elizabeth out of the cell and bring her to the hospital. And this is where we come in April 2008. The doctor, who I mentioned before, actually notified the police that both that Elizabeth and Joseph were in the hospital, and they took them in for questioning. Now, Elizabeth was questioned, but she was so adamant that she was not going to say another word until she was promised that she would never have to see her father again. And once the police could guarantee that and protect Elizabeth, she then proceeded, I think it was over a 2 or 3 hour period, then proceeded to tell them the horrific story of her 24 years in captivity. And this, I think, at the trial, when it went to trial, the jury were played over 11 hours of these type of interviews, and they said it was so harrowing they had to stop every 2 hours. They couldn't take more than 2 hours listening to it and watching it, because what happened to her, how she was treated, what her own father did to her, they just couldn't take it all in at once. And this is 24 years of it. She went in at 18, she came out at 42. Just her whole life was spent in this tiny prison. Elizabeth would then say, which was another horrific part of it, that her father forced her, eventually when they got a TV down in the cellar, he forced her to watch pornographic material, which then he wanted her to enact these situations in front of her children to more humiliate her, to kind of diminish and make her feel so small that she had nowhere to go. And then Joseph himself would then threaten the children by saying, you know, if you try to escape, I can gas the room, which was an empty threat in the end because there was no pipes leading into the room. And he also told them another thing: if they went near the door, they would get a severe electric shock. Again, totally bullshit, basically. And the room was so soundproof that the wife, the children, everyone was upstairs. They never realized anything was downstairs. But there was also tenants below the house, and there was one tenant that lived in there for 12 years, and they said never heard anything. completely soundproof. We never heard anything. So it was just heartbreaking. So this happened in 2008, and then on the 16th of March 2009, it went to trial. And I will show pictures here of the coward that Josef Fritzl was, that he went into court but had a big massive blue binder around his face, which apparently he was entitled to do to cover his face from the media. And once the media and everyone was told to leave the courtroom, he brought down the binder and he was charged. And on this trial, when these were put to him in March in 2009, he pled, once everyone that cleaned the courtroom, he pleaded guilty to all of them. I don't know if the sexual assault was still going on, but this man was 73 when he was arrested. 73, and just twisted motherfucker. Again, DNA test was ran on all the children and it proved that Josef was their biological father, and this allowed the prosecution to go for, well, this proved incest, but not necessarily rape or sexual abuse, because Josef himself said it was consensual. Yeah. That's why she was in a cellar for 24 years. And also with the cellar which he would come in through, he had made this kind of, obviously he'd made the cellar, but he had made a pathway, which was, the room was soundproof, the pathway was soundproof, but then it was a key code to get in and out of the room. So the fucker knew what he was doing. But I love the way the defense said, this is the crazy thing about the trial. The defense came and said, oh, you know, he was caring. He brought a Christmas tree down to the basement. A Christmas tree. He kept them in the basement. I don't care if you're bringing Father Christmas or Santa Claus down him fucking self. Jesus. So eventually, after the trial and everything like that, we see that on the 27th of April the previous year, when it all came to light, both Elizabeth and her mother and all the children were taken into care because they obviously needed therapy and they needed psychological testing, everything like this. There was trying to get to integrate the children upstairs with the children downstairs. Obviously upstairs we're dealing with the hurt, the rejection, the abuse, and the actual lies that their grandfather/father had told them about the mother. While the ones downstairs, it was said, was it Stefan was so tall that unfortunately he had to stoop constantly in the cellar. So when he had to, when they were eventually released from the cellar, he actually had problems walking. And both Stefan and Kirsten, if there was a light change or, you know, people were turning off lights or anything like that, it would throw them into complete and utter panic attacks. Completely reasonable. And I suppose Felix was the youngest. He was born in 2002, so he would have been 6, so perhaps he didn't remember as much, but it's still so crazy. Now, the rest of the Fritzl family, it was said that they were offered a change of name if they had wanted to. I don't know if any of them took it, because there was brothers and sisters. There was children, original children of Joseph's, that I would say I definitely didn't want to be associated with the prick. But once he was imprisoned, he got imprisonment obviously for life, but he was 73 when he was arrested, so I don't know how much he'd really suffer. But once Rosemary and Elizabeth and all the children were in care, it was said that Elizabeth and Rosemary probably didn't have the best relationship, and Elizabeth actually ended up kicking her mother out of that kind of bubble purely because she couldn't accept that her mother was so passive when she was kind of growing up, and she didn't fight harder, and she kind of accepted everything that Josef said, that she ran off and joined a cult and she abandoned her children. I think it is said that they are slowly working up a relationship and everything like that, but there's probably been so much psychological damage done. It's just heartbreaking. So Josef was imprisoned for life. But there's a few more things about Josef that only came to light as well. Back in '67, he was said to have broken into a home of a 24-year-old nurse and sexually assaulted her when her husband wasn't at home. And he was also suspected of an attempt of another rape of a 21-year-old girl. And although he served, wait this, 12 months of a 18-month sentence, after 15 years his record was expunged by the law. So therefore, when he went to adopt the grandchildren. His criminal history never showed up. It wasn't thought of, so it didn't stop any processes. And there's also a thought that he was a little bit damaged from his own childhood. His father abandoned them when he was quite young, and his mother was a working mother. And again, I saw this online. He called himself, first of all, he said she was the best mother in the world and she was only strict when she had to be. But then he started to change, saying, you know, all I wanted was a kiss and a cuddle and she could never give me that. I was an alibi baby, which to me, I was like, what the fuck is an alibi baby? And he said it was more proof of his mother having given birth so she could prove she wasn't barren and she could bear children. How much of that is true, I don't know. But they did diagnose Joseph, again, with a few kind of disorders like borderline personality, with sexual aggression tendencies like that. And also it was said when he moved and like bought his house, he then started to take care of his mother. Unfortunately, he locked his mother in a room as well and bricked up her window. She died in 1980, but he had told people she had died years before. So they think she might have been in a room for about 20 years herself. His mother was held captive for about 20 years. Now, they can't confirm how long she was in there and when he boarded the room and the windows up. It was just have said to have been 20 years, which is wow, fucking crazy. And he also said, like, I'm not the beast the media portray me to. I brought Elizabeth flowers, I bought toys for the kids, and I had to imprison her because she was getting out of line basically in her teenage years and she wouldn't adhere to the rules. But it was proven years later it wasn't for discipline, it was for his own gratification. Yeah, you think? So Fritzl, then he pleaded guilty to all the charges and he was given a life sentence at 73. There was an interview, I think it was a British, was it a tabloid or was it a British newspaper or something like that? They said they talked to him in an interview and he shows no remorse whatsoever about what he did. And he was actually quoted as saying, you should look in other people's cellars. There could be other girls down there too. Like it was a perfectly normal thing to do. Oh, fucking hell. But in 2017, the fucker, by the way, the fucker is still alive in Garston Abbey, which is in Upper Austria, serving his life sentence, still living with no psychological damage whatsoever. But in 2007, he then changed his name from Fritzl to, I want to say Meyerhoff, Mayrhoft. Wait, this, you'll love this though, because he was getting the shit kicked out of him. I don't care how old he is, you kick the shit out of him. And he ended up losing a few teeth, and then something about the other prisoners set up an online dating site for him. I don't know, but he was getting the shit kicked out of him, so therefore he had to change his name. I think everyone knows what he looks like and he's well documented what he looked like, so I don't think changing a name would help that much. But as of 2020, where he was 85, he's still serving his life sentence. Elizabeth and the children were said to have well adjusted. I don't think I can find any photos, but I'm not going to put up photos anyway because they have been through enough. I don't think it's fair to kind of go investigating in that. But they have said to adapted. Elizabeth loves to go out on walks and she loves to shop. The children have all adapted and they play in kind of in wide open spaces. So they seem to be healing, but they're in a kind of unknown town somewhere in Austria, which is absolutely fine because they have been through so much. They deserve everything they get. Rosemary, his wife, kind of lives by herself in a little apartment. I don't think Elizabeth visits her, but the children that she raised, her grandchildren that they raised, do continue to visit her because she was their mother figure for so many years. So there's some great books and films out there. There's a film called Room. I think it is also a book, but there's also a very good book and it's called The Crimes of Josef Fritzl, Uncovering the Truth. And there is also that film called The Girl in the Basement, which is loosely based around it, but it's still quite horrific to watch as well. So guys, I know he's well known, and that is the horrific, horrendous, terrible crimes of Josef Fritzl and the amazing survivor story of Elizabeth Fritzl. It's a twisted case. It's so twisted to see a father do that, to be that twisted because she didn't obey his rules when she was 18. She was 18. Who's good at 18? Who fucking obeys any rules at 18? But it was just a horrendous case study, and I really wanted to do it. And this is the one I wanted to do last week. By the way, my neck is absolutely fine. Just getting old, guys. I'm just getting old. But yeah, let me know what you think down below, guys. There is obviously a lot more. There is a ton more information out there, but I didn't want to get bogged down because I wanted to tell kind of the basic story of it, because there's just too much. There's too much information, and it is just a horrendous case to deep dive into what the family went through. And like, nobody ever says about Elizabeth's remaining siblings, like what they've gone through as well, you know, kind of their father did this to their sister unbeknownst to anyone. So yeah, let me know what you think down below, guys. That's going to be it for today. Whoop whoop for True Crime Thursdays. Again, if you like this video, big thumbs up, hit the subscribe. If you want any murders or any people talked about, remember there is unforgettablemurders@gmail.com. Please don't be afraid to reach out with on Twitter or Instagram. I am Addy2811. I'll pop it up on the screen. But yeah, if you lasted this long, guys, thank you so much for sticking with me. Thank you to my sister who gave me sunflowers for my background for my birthday. Stay cool, stay calm, and wear a goddamn mask, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.